GM to YouTube. So we have been pushing a lot of tech at Mohka, and a ton of new stuff has been found, a lot of hidden mechanics that the devs put in there that we just didn't know about, and a lot of things to take advantage of. So we're just going to get right into that. If you are looking for a full breakdown of what to do at the boss, we do have a guide up, so you can just go check that out. I'm not going to go over every single mechanic or how to do everything, but I'm going to explain the new stuff and what you should be taking advantage of that's changed. So the first big thing we've noticed that I didn't know day one is that when Mohka is in car mode, you are 100% accurate and you cannot miss. This is very similar to Tormented Demons, where you just get a part of the fight that's 100% accurate, and we can take advantage of that in a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different weapons. I'm not going to get into the gear immediately right now. I'm just explaining what the mechanics are, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Another new thing that was found is melee punish. So what this is when Mohka throws up that ranged mage prayer and you have to go hit with a weapon to block that. So what this melee punish is that mage range prayer that Mohka throws up occasionally with the charge meter and you've got a hitter to block the attack. Well, you actually do bonus damage in an additional hit splat during this phase. And the way this works is when you do the hit, what the game is doing is it gives you bonus damage per hit splat you deal based on your total strength bonus. The formula for this is as simple as strength bonus divided by 5 is what the additional damage is per splat. A bunch of things are super good for punishing here and give you a ton of damage. You can hit well over 100 during this phase. So we'll go into how to take advantage of that in just a little bit as well. Another thing we found is that the acid that Mohka generates is based on the instances of damage you deal. So this includes thralls. So per shot that lands on the boss, it does a little spurt of acid. So when you summon a thrall at the beginning, it's basically gonna double the amount of acid that you're getting. So what I've started doing is not summoning a thrall for the first 25% of Mohka's health. And then when Mohka throws up the shield, I then summon a thrall. Just to minimize the amount of acid on the screen, it helps a lot, and it really reduces the acid. One of the things they've patched as well, there was a minor patch they did on the orb phase. A lot of people are like, oh my god, the orb phase is the worst thing ever made. It's horrible, and I kind of agree. It's really brutal to deal with. But what they've done is they've just made it have an extra tick of protection at the end, so it doesn't drop you out of it as quickly at the end, and you'll have a little bit more leeway. It actually does make a big difference, and it makes this attack much more manageable. Another weird hidden mechanic they've added is holy water. So that melee punish we were talking about, if you happen to kill Mohka as you do that punish, it actually shoots out a bunch of holy water in all different directions, completely random tiles. If this lands in your acid, it'll clear it in a 3x3, and if it lands on you, it will heal you. This is a really cool mechanic. Unfortunately, you can't take advantage of this after Cave 5 because you're never ever going to finish again, because Mohka never does this mechanic after the smite phase. So you never ever are going to be doing this, which is kind of a shame. We've talked to JMods a little bit about it. I would really like to see some way to use this mechanic late to actually clear acid, allowing you to melee the boss, because currently the acid stacks up near the boss, in melee range, and you just can't melee anymore, and there's just absolutely no way to clear acid. And it also makes those melee grubs that spawn way less fair. Maybe this is something they'll be changing, I don't know. Currently there's not really a way to take advantage of this late caves, but you occasionally get to take advantage of it early, and it's kind of nice. So getting into all the new gear, all the new stuff, all the new calcs, all the numbers. Okay, what stuff should we be doing? The main thing that people have been arguing very often is Masori versus Void. And I personally flip-flopped on stream, I think 5 times yesterday. I went back and forth on it over and over and over. The reason there's so much contention here is that you max 81 in max ranged, normally with Masori, but with Void you max 86. 5 extra max hits, which is massive. The problem is we're dropping 9% accuracy to do that. And that ends up being worse overall for normal hits. But for that car phase we were talking about, and any phase we are 100% accurate, this includes the shield phase, you're also 100% accurate for that. Void actually is better by quite a bit. For specific parts of the fight, Void is better, but Masori is better normally. So this is the big argument. The overall takeaway and what I've landed on is Masori being a bit better. And the reason for this is that you actually can block the protection prayers of Mohka, just like Leviathan, the exact same way. Sometimes they don't hit you if you misspray. Masori ends up being roughly 12% better. It's 10% more blocked mage damage and 17% more blocked range damage, which is a lot. Now, it's not very much more blocked melee damage. The reason this doesn't matter very much though, and the reason for the calcs I've turned on protect melee just to cut that out, is because the amount of times you take a melee prey is really limited. It's only during car phase or at the end of those giant bursts of prayers, the majority of the damage you take is going to be major ranged. So you can see that Masori is quite a bit tankier, and it can make the difference because an off-pray can be up to like 60 damage. So Masori blocking a full 60 is like, it's not to be understated that defense is relevant. There's an argument to be made that Void could be better. It's really nice to have a little bit more burst damage during the car phase, which is the reason a lot of people are bringing it. But also it has the potential to low roll you. Maybe you roll a lot of 5s. Like you're landing your shots, but you're low rolling repeatedly. You end at a car phase, and then you just start missing because your accuracy is just so low, and you take that orb phase. Masori's accuracy is also really nice for specs outside of 100% accuracy when you're landing ZCBs. If you're D-knifing early, the D-knives are tremendously better if you're in Masori versus Void numbers. Now, Gearscape also added melee shield mode, so you can actually see what your punish damage will end up being at the end of the day. So important things to keep in mind, first of all, with the melee punish are that things like Piety or combat pot or anything like that. I had a lot of people asking, should you bring a super combat pot? Should you bring a Void melee helm? Things like that. Like if you're wearing Void, like surely that's worth it. It's not, because those things don't affect your strength bonus, which is the only thing that affects the bonus damage. Now, these things are going to help your normal swing on the boss, but they're not going to boost the bonus damage. So bringing switches just to boost that normal swing is not going to be worth it. The goal is always going to be maximize strength bonus. One of the things I've seen people get really excited about with this is Chally. Chally. Have you tried Chally? Chally is not worth using. And you can see it here. The Chally is actually 26 DPS total versus a Scythe, which is 28 DPS. And you're like, how is that? Because you can see the Chally max it is 156. Where the Scythe max it is 115. So how can Chally be worse DPS? The reason is Chally is 7 tick and a Scythe is 5 tick. And the huge benefit of Scythe is it has a lot of strength bonus and it has 3 hit splats. So overall, what you're doing when you Chally spec is you're spending 30% spec to do an incredibly slow, heavy hitting double hit splat hit. Where what you could do is just swing a Scythe, which is a relatively slow hit, triple hit splat, and take advantage of that without wasting any spec energy. And then, after that, you get to use a bunch of D-knives on car phase, instead of wasting those for something that's worse damage. So Chally is not going to be worth it overall. Claws are not correct in Gearscape currently. They don't show the correct damage. They are better than a Scythe, but you're going to find that overall, D-knives are more important to spend your resources on than speccing during the melee punish. You don't want to be wasting any spec energy on that melee punish. You want to be using it on the car phase because we've got to beat that orb phase, and beating that orb phase is determined by how much damage you do as soon as the car spawns. Because if you don't do enough damage after the car spawns, he'll get out of car phase, he'll start spawning the earthen nodes, and then you're going to have to deal with the orb, which is not something you want to do. So your DPS is most important during that. You don't want to waste spec at other times, unless you're just like opening with a ZCB to get out of that initial phase quickly. So don't waste spec on the melee punish. Now, what I've done and what I like and I've fallen on is just doing a 2-way switch for this. You could do a huge switch. You could do like 6-way if you wanted. You'd get a massive punish. It would hit like sometimes 180 damage. Like that would be awesome. That damage isn't that impactful because it's only going to push you into the shield phase. It is never going to do something impactful like get you past car phase more safely. So spending a bunch of brew slots on melee punish items is not really worth it from my experience. Maybe in the future we'll end up doing stuff like that for speeds and stuff, but for right now it doesn't seem super worthwhile to do that. So what I've done is I just bring a 2-way. Your second switch is going to be like the biggest strength you're going to get for your weapon. What I do is either bring Ferocious Gloves, which are actually 14 strength. Ferocious Gloves are crazy amounts of strength bonus, or bring Blood Fury. What you're trying to do is get yourself to a decent threshold where you're close to the next 5 strength bonus. Like if you end on a 5, like 115, 110, 120 strength, something like that, that's going to be ideal for like the most bonus damage. And if you find that Feral Gloves are just short, like maybe they get you to 114, then you want to bring the Blood Fury just for the added healing. Like it's going to be nice to get that healing off that Scythe swing, because you're not quite getting to the threshold to get the full effect of your Feral Gloves. A common question I've gotten a lot too with the melee punish is, does that proc Blood Fury off the additional hits? It doesn't. It actually doesn't do anything. So a lot of people are like, oh, what about SGS? What about Bando's Godsword? What about anything that like drains? It's not going to do any additional effect off those bonus damage. The bonus damage is just damage to the boss. That's it. It's not going to heal you, not going to restore prayer. It's not going to do anything like that. It's just damage. There's no reason to be screwing around with stuff like that. Just do the most damage possible, basically. Okay, and this brings me to my newest development. You can see on the screen I have a ton of tile markers. This is my new rock block method that Hedron and I worked on. Basically, we had an idea for how to use these rocks to our advantage that the boss drops, and we both got together, put some tiles together, and we ended up with this. So basically, what the idea is with this mechanic, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, we'll come back, is that we are purposefully dropping rocks at the beginning of the fight, because when the boss throws those rocks in the air, they drop where you're standing, so you can control where they end up going. And then after the shield phase happens with those purposefully placed rocks, you're going to, as soon as car phase starts, stand on a specific tile to bait the boss behind you. You can see the eyeball spawns. This is actually always 4 tiles behind your character, which means you can exactly control where the boss goes as well. So not only can we control where the rocks go, we can control where the boss goes. And that means we get to abuse this. So I put this rock on this tile exactly. It's going to block that first shockwave, and it's also going to protect the second rock I've placed. Okay? So then I'm going to purposefully stand in line next to where that first rock was, until the next eyeball spawns. You can see it spawns directly on top of that rock. That's going to be very important. So as soon as that eyeball pops up, the boss has like figured out where it's going to go. I get out of the way, just like that. And the boss is on top of the rock. And this is something you might not have seen. Why do we care that the boss is on top of the rock? The shockwave on the boss actually radiates from its dead center tile. So that means if the boss ends up on a rock, which for some reason it doesn't destroy on the last dash, if the boss ends up directly dead center on a rock, it's going to do that shockwave attack, and then nothing happens. Absolutely nothing. So what happened is that rock just ate the force of the entire shockwave. So what that means is that shockwave, A, you dodge it by default. Like, you're not going to take any damage from it. And B, it's not going to delete any of the other rocks in the arena. So that means if you do this tech properly, you will never, ever, ever get hit by a shockwave ever again. It is guaranteed safe. This is one of the biggest things I've found that has been like taking up my health, is me taking one of the shockwaves because I've got no rocks left. Well, this solves that completely. So you don't have to deal with the second shockwave, and it also makes it so you're always 100% safe. So I'll break down exactly how to do this right now. I have a bunch of different colored tiles. So what does any of this mean? Effectively, this is the same method. It's only 4 tiles to do the method. It's only these 4 tiles, but I have them color-coded and rotated around each side of the arena. And the reason this matters is because we don't know where the acid's going to be ending up. So you want to pick a side at the beginning of the cave where you're going to place these rocks that doesn't have a lot of acid next to it. So that's the idea. You're trying to use the side that has the least acid so you can take advantage of this. So what you do is right at the beginning of the fight, and I see that the boss is spitting acid directly at these rocks, so I choose a different side. So that's the benefit of having this duplicated 4 times, is that you just pick a side that works well, and you just use the color-coded tiles to do the method. Okay? So what I do, and this is cave 6, so we're only getting single rocks here. We see the boss shoots out a rock at me, and I'm about to hit 75%. So this is the downside of doing this on the early caves, is that you have to wait. So if I push this into the shield phase immediately, I will not get that second rock I need, which is unfortunate. So I've got to wait here a second until the boss shoots another rock, which you can see now. And that's perfect. So I'm going to do the melee punish. And now we have 2 rocks placed exactly where you want them. So that's the idea. You're going to be standing on rock 2 and then standing on rock 1. And you probably want to pray properly against this attack too. That's a good idea. So then you're just dealing with shield phase the way you normally do. The grubs aren't always going to be like right next to the corner we're going to need to stand on. But after you finish shield phase, what you're going to do is work your way over to the color-coded tile that says bait. So you're going to finish up the shield phase. Just keep in the boss, finish it up. Okay, I try to finish off all the other grubs on the sides. And then the boss turns into car, and you're going to stand on this tile until you see the eyeball appear behind you. So this is going to bait the boss directly where we want it to go. So you're going to see eyeball's going to spawn right behind me. That's my cue to click out of the way. Okay, so I just dodge it like that. I stand behind this rock, which is going to block rock 2 from getting destroyed. It's going to be completely safe because it's in the safe area as well. And then what you're going to do after that is just stand on the dodge tile. Now, it doesn't always have to be on this dodge tile. Maybe this is ragged by acid. Maybe something happened. What is important is that you are in line with rock 1, okay? Because it's going to put the eyeball 4 tiles behind you onto rock 2 as long as you're in line with rock 1. So you're standing on top of, effectively, where the rock got destroyed, okay? And you're going to see, boom, eyeball appears behind me. directly on top of the rock. So you can see it doesn't matter exactly where you're positioned, but you need to be like x-axis this direction away from the eyeball. And if you're like, why doesn't it matter where you're standing? Like, why don't you have to be on top of rock 1? That's because Mohka only can do the eyeball from her dead center. It can only come from her dead center tile. So as long as you are on the right position, like here, it'll put the eyeball 4 tiles behind you, center of the boss. So that's why we've put the boss in this exact position to put it on rock 2 exactly. So now all you're going to do is on dodge tile, you see the eyeball appear, step 2 tiles out of the way. Just like that. And now you're going to see shockwave gets completely absorbed. Now it's going to do one more dash. So you just get it in a spot where it's not going to destroy any rocks. Go to any other rock in the arena and block that last shockwave. And boom, mechanics completely dealt with. Absolutely no danger whatsoever. No thinking required. Okay, so now I'm going to show the method on Cave 8. So this is different on Cave 8 and a lot better on Cave 8 actually, because the boss shoots 2 rocks. So that means you don't ever have to wait for 2 rocks. As soon as the boss shoots out a single rock, you can do this method. So you don't ever have to wait. So you can see I got triple melee grub here. I just position myself. I don't deal with them. I just let them go in. And we see the boss shoots out 2 rocks. So here's what you're going to do to make this work. You are trying to time this based on your prayer shutting off. As soon as you see your prayer turn off, you're going to click from rock 2 to rock 1. So you're going to see it in action here. Prayer turns off. I click immediately, and I start running over to rock 1. And then the second boulder shatters over rock 1. So what you want to do is click just past rock 1. So that's going to path your character the same way I just did. I manually clicked, but you can actually just do that in one fluid motion. I'll show it again here. So you want to click basically any of these tiles, like just past rock 1, your character's going to run past it and then path out of the way of the rock that just landed, effectively, is what's going to happen. So I run to here, out of the way, and just like that, boom, 2 rocks are down, right? So what's nice about this is you're doing one fluid motion, and then you're getting ready to pray immediately after you get past this tile. So you see your true tile hit here, you're going to pray against the attack, and then get on the boss. That's the idea. Okay, and then same as before. You're just going to deal with the grubs exact same as last cave. So we're going to get past this. Go onto the bait tile for the car. And one of the things I didn't show is that this is, would you look at that, 4 tiles away from the boss. How convenient is that? You know what that means? We get to dump every single D-knife spec immediately after dodging that first dash. You get to spam them. D-knife, 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 D-knife. And you could see the ridiculous damage that dish did. That was over 100 damage. Like, it's crazy how much damage the D-knives do. And this gives you a very, very clean, consistent way to get all of the specs off without it being a problem. So you can see, it's going to go directly on top of rock 2, just like before, which is going to eat that shockwave. I see all you have to do after that second shockwave is just locate any rock in the room and make sure Mohka doesn't run it over. So I see that rock next to Mohka. Make sure they don't run it over. And hide behind it. That's all you have to do to deal with a shockwave and get all of your D-knives off. So this cuts out a huge amount of the, like, awful, like, oh, I gotta run up to, and then, like, do D-knives, and then I'm losing ticks, like, trying to get out of range. Like, none of that anymore. Now what happens is you just get to get all 4 D-knives off right at the beginning and deal with the whole car phase. This tech makes the boss so much simpler and so much easier. It's going to seriously simplify things. It's going to reduce the chip damage you take tremendously. If you ever were messing up shockwave or getting hit by the car, like, that damage adds up rapidly. You could be taking 80 damage per car phase. So this cuts down on that so much. Okay, so the main breakdown, basically, putting this all together, like what I do for a kill. Assuming you're going into the cave with 100% spec, this isn't always going to be the case, but assuming you're going into the cave with 100% spec, what you're going to want to do is just open with a ZCB to push it quickly into that shield phase. Like I said, the less hit splats you do is the less acid you're going to generate, and the less terrible, like, attacks you're going to have to deal with. The boss does so many different horrible attacks at the start, like huge bursts of prayer attacks. You want to get through that beginning phase fairly quickly. So opening with the ZCB is going to push you past that quickly and generate very little acid. And then you're just going to T-bow the boss down to 75. At 75, the shield phase is going to start. And this is going to be the same as before. It's just very important to have Death Charge active for this. Because what you're going to find is by the end of shield phase, typically what's going to happen is you'll get about 50% spec back, assuming you double death charged and have a light bearer. And that's going to enable you to get an extra 2 D knives at the car phase. If you went into a cave with 100% spec, you're going to find that when you start car phase, you're going to have 75, which has been working really well for me. I'm finding that 3 D knife specs is really consistent for killing the boss before the orb phase at the end. A lot of times it's going to be worth milking at the end a little bit just to get up to that initial ZCB. But if you find you're like at the end of the cave and you're like very low spec, it's okay to just skip the ZCB. Just if you ever don't have the energy for ZCB at the start, don't do any specs. Don't waste any D knives. Don't do anything. Just hold your spec energy until that car phase, because it is so important that you take advantage of the DPS on that phase. Like, you do not want to have no spec energy for that, because that's going to end up giving you those orb phases, which are horrible. They're going to murder you, so you don't want to be getting those. GM to past Gnomonkey viewers. This is future Gnomonkey speaking. There's actually a slight problem that you have to keep in mind. It's jank overkill, okay? So I'm not going to go into a full explanation of what overkill is, but if you get overkill on the boss as it goes towards that rock, as you do in this case, it will destroy the rock. So when you step away from dodge, as I do here, okay? If you do an attack, a T-bow shot, whatever, if you do an attack right after sidestepping, it will destroy the rock, just like it did right there. So to avoid that, don't summon a thrall. So now you wait even longer to summon a thrall. Only use it at the very, very end of the boss fight. Don't summon a thrall, so you avoid the 1 in 4 chance of that happening. And don't attack the boss right as it dashes. So you need to delay if that's what your cooldown is looking like. You have to wait. You have to wait, or it will destroy the rock and hit you. And hit you. Okay? So it still works. Just be wary. Don't get overkill. You could summon melee thrall from far away. There's options. Just addendum on the guide. Don't get overkill. It ruins it. Okay? It still works though, I swear. Good night to you too. Bang, bang, bang. Okay, and that's it for the rock block method. We'll have tile markers below. I'll make a pig spin so you guys can import this and use it yourself. The tech for Mohka has been rapidly developing, and that's the reason I'm doing like a tech video instead of like a new budget guide or something like that. A lot of people want a budget guide, but the tech is coming along so quickly. People are finding new setups, new methods, a bunch of new stuff. I want the budget guide to stand and do well, like long term. So I'm going to give it a couple days probably before making that. But what I will do is, because there's a lot of really common questions that people keep asking, is just like do an FAQ here for like the common questions that people are always asking, just so like you have them answered, you know, like what gear to use in certain cases. So I'll just go through that right now. A lot of people ask me, what do you use if you don't have a T-bow? The answer is Scobo. It's always Scobo. Scobo is about 14% worse than a T-bow, so it is significantly worse, but you can get kills with it. Scobo is usable. It is absolutely usable. You can get kills with it. Do you need Demon Bane? Yes, you have to have a Scobo because you need a ranged Demon Bane weapon. The other two you need as well, but Mage is covered by Dark Demon Bane, so it's cast with any staff. A Skull Scepter works. Like the exact same as a Purging Staff. There's no difference between those two weapons. Doesn't matter what you use, as long as it can auto-cast Arceus, it's plenty good for this. You can also use any melee Demon Bane, which includes Arclight, Darklight even. You could use Silverlight, potentially even, to one-shot these grubs. There's no difference between those weapons. And you could also use Burning Claws, because they are slightly Demon Bane. Those also will one-shot the grubs. So a lot of things to keep in mind. The only true Synapse you're going to need at this boss is a Scobo. That is the only thing that is required. On that melee punish we were talking about, what do you use if you don't have a scythe? Boppers, boppers, boppers. The Mohka Heedle are so good compared to everything else. The other spec options are okay if you don't have the boppers even. You could use claws. I think burning claws are probably the second best. Nothing really comes close to scythe or boppers. So if you can get those before fighting this boss, it's going to help a lot. It's going to do a lot of damage. What do you do if you don't have a ZCB or Ralos? Just spam D knives. Now I know they've shot up in price ever since I showed them on stream. I think they're over 10K right now. They are expensive, but keep in mind you're only using 1/5 of those per attack. So it ends up being not too much because you're only speccing with them. You don't need a ton of these to get through a kill. They don't cost that much. And what's great is there's no upfront cost. You don't have to pay 500 mil for a ZCB. Like, you can just have D knives, like no matter how much money you have. So if you don't have a ZCB, I would literally just spam D knives as your only spec. That's what I would use. Let's say you're an Iron Man. If you don't have spec weapons, should you bring the Desert Treasure 2 rings? You can, but like pushing past even like K4 is going to be a lot harder without one of the spec weapons we've said. Like a ZCB or D knives are going to be really, really important for pushing. But yes, you can bring DT2 rings. At the very least, if you don't have a good spec, bring Warhammer or Elder Maul. Like both of those are still good even in full range gear. They will drain the boss's defense and they hit with about 80% accuracy, so they're not terrible. Should you use Serp? You can poison the boss and it gives you a venom immunity. Yeah, that's all good, but it has a ton of negative ranged defense, or yeah, that's all well and good, but the Serp has a ton of negative ranged accuracy, so that really, really sucks. What I'd highly recommend is just bringing Sandfew, or bring one anti-venom pot, depending on how deep you're farming. And can you use a Bofa here if you don't have a Synapse? Don't. Just don't. Get the Synapse. Like, you really don't have an excuse. Get the Synapse. You want that Scobo really bad. Yes, you can clear caves with a Bofa, but again, it's about 15% worse than the Scobo. And keep in mind, the Scobo is 15% worse than the T-Bow. So these are compounding. Like, you really, really, really don't want to be using a Bofa. You want to be using a Scobo here. Another thing to keep in mind is Void is extremely good with Scobo. So there's no question of Masori versus Void with the Scobo. It's 4 max hits, and the Scobo is fairly accurate compared to T-Bow. So it has a lot more accuracy. So if you're using a Scobo, just make sure you use Void with it. It's going to be a little bit better. Okay, and that's it for the FAQ. If there's any other gear questions you have, just keep in mind Gearscape has basically everything you could possibly need. All the new gear, all the new boss states, 100% accuracy, melee punish, all of that is in there, so you can use that to go check anything that you're curious about with your setup, see what's good, see what's not good.